In a crisis, people have to make decisions. I think to use part of what John F. Kennedy said a long time ago, the risks and costs of comfortable inaction are very high. And I like decision making and action. So I switched from SWAT to negotiations and loved it.
Welcome to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg.
We are live from Laguna Beach, California at the Ben Reinberg I Own It studios today. And today we just keep rolling out incredible guests. This gentleman is a real icon in what he does. And I'm very excited to bring him on the show today. Chris Voss, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining us.
Ben, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Before going into private practice, you spent 24 years as a top FBI hostage negotiator. Let's kick things off today. Share your story as an FBI agent and what attracted you to the FBI and to hostage negotiations.
Well, challenges overall, innovations, doing things different, being independent, being entrepreneurial. I'm very autonomous. And so I liked autonomous things. Now, originally, when I was an FBI agent, and you become hostage negotiator as an additional duty, there are other things you could do also, like being on a SWAT team. I was originally on a SWAT team, and I loved being on a SWAT team, but I had a recurring knee injury, and it sort of forced me out of tactics or, continuing it till my knee is destroyed. And I wanted to stay in crisis response. So while I was working terrorism in New York, I decided I should be a hostage negotiator. The head of the team had other thoughts. She pointed out to me quite clearly that I was unqualified. And I just asked her how to get qualified. And I followed her advice. But what I loved about it always was needing to make decisions. In a crisis, people have to make decisions. I think to use part of what John F. Kennedy said a long time ago, the risks and costs of comfortable inaction are very high. And I like decision making and action. So I switched from SWAT to negotiations and loved it. It was challenging. It was rewarding. Yeah, it was very much, make it up on the spot a little bit within your training. It's sort of like in American football, you prepare for the snap of the ball. And then when the ball snaps, there's a lot of chaos on both sides. And I loved making decisions and helping people.
Is there a certain set of personalities and temperaments that tend to gravitate to hostage negotiators at the FBI?
You might think so. In point of fact, I think there are three basic types to approach conflict: fight, flight, make friends. In my company, we test people for that, which is your principal base strength type: fight, flight, or make friends. How do you approach conflict? And we believe that the world splits up pretty evenly into thirds, regardless of gender, ethnicity, religion, politics, any of that stuff. And all three types ended up getting attracted to hostage negotiations for different reasons. I'm a natural born fight, assertive type, assertive, analyst, accommodator, fight, flight, make friends. And I thought that should be the natural type for negotiations because you had to be assertive to save lives. Yeah, it's essential and inadequate. You got to be very analytical. The flight type person just sees conflict as an option and a costly option. And through their analysis, will often choose another path other than fight, flight, excuse me. And then the make friends, the accommodator, relationship oriented. You got to be likable to be in negotiations. And as it turned out, all three types end up wanting to do hostage negotiations for different motivations.
See, I imagine there's a lot of waiting and then periods of intense action and decision making. Is that the case?
Well, in point of fact, there's all sorts of analysis to do while you're waiting. There's predictable dialogue. There's an assessment of the situation. And so there really isn't any waiting if you're thinking, if you're preparing. And one of the most impressive people I ever saw among the those that I learned from, the Waco series, American Apocalypse, has been on Netflix recently. One of the people featured in that was Gary Nestor, my former boss, and I learned a lot from him. But in a much smaller role, who wasn't featured in it at all because they couldn't put everybody in. Negotiator Byron Sage was one of the principal speakers in that case. And after Waco, I remember Byron, they were working a fugitive case and they were looking for a fugitive from the Olympic Park bombing in Atlanta. And they set up all this predicted dialogue and what would they say if he said this. And they never even talked to this guy, but all did a massive amount of assessment and analysis and preparation while they were waiting. And I was really impressed with the proactive nature of that. What's he likely to say? Let's just not figure out one thing. Let's figure out several different decision trees, if you will, and then we'll prepare along those lines. So the waiting is actually an opportunity to prepare.
Okay. Well, early in your career, what were the most challenging skills for you to learn?
Wow. There's a pivot point depending upon the person on the other side. Now, the listening and for we used to call it emotion labels, and we call it now the Black Swan method for all negotiations, just labeling. It's an analytical process to try to get at what's really driving somebody emotionally. Get in depth with them. And simultaneously, if they're an extremely manipulative type, you need to rotate completely out of that and ask what we call calibrated questions. What or how questions. Like, what's this? What good is this really doing you? Or how do your actions match up with what you say you want? Now, that's a pretty big pivot. And I got really good, and I still am very good at the emotion labeling, the labeling. Seems like something's on your mind is an example of a label. Seems like you have a reason for thinking that is a way to challenge somebody on their thinking without making them feel challenged. And to drop that entirely and shift over to these almost confrontational questions, but legitimate. That's always been a challenge for me.
So while you're at the FBI, Chris, you led some very high profile situations, including involving terrorists and international kidnappers. Which cases are the most rewarding to you?
Well, there were two that were ridiculously rewarding. I changed our proof of life strategy based on a past failure of a case that I was involved in where people got killed. The Burnham Sabero case in the Philippines um, was ugly from end to end. Hostages died. Two out of the three Americans that were originally kidnapped were killed. The first one was executed by the terrorists. Guillermo Sabero was executed, and Martin Burnham was killed by friendly fire 13 months later in a botched rescue attempt. And I just, when something bad happens, you either quit or you get better. Post traumatic stress or post traumatic growth. As it turned out, my option was we got to get better. So I decided that we had to evolve and adopt a new skill, change our proof of life strategy. And the very first case that I applied it in, the bad guy provided proof of life right off the bat, which said, wow, you're ruining my approach. But it was a fundamentally sound negotiation approach that it ultimately led to a rescue and a capture of the bad guy. That was enormously satisfying. In the very next case we had after that, a very similar thing happened where they never provided proof of life at all, despite my new strategy. And we found out after the fact that it led to the hostage engineering his own escape. And so those were ridiculously satisfying moments. Those made me really happy when the unexpected consequences of changes in our strategies were positive.
So, in addition to what you just shared, Chris, share with our listeners a flavor for some exciting moments you had as an FBI negotiator.
Oh, wow. The Chase Manhattan bank robbery, which was the first movie-like hostage siege that I was ever involved in. And, bank robberies with hostages, well, they happen in TV all the time. They're really extremely rare events in real life. Usually the bank robberies are gone long before law enforcement shows up. Bank robbers are almost never caught inside the bank. And when this happened in New York City, it had been 20 years since the last time it happened in New York. I mean, these are really rare events. And so just sitting down at that was a challenge. And I wanted to drop into my trading. I spent a lot of time in trading and preparation. You fall to your highest level of preparation. You got to trade. Tiger Woods practices on the practice tees all the time. And then in the middle of it, out of the blue, our bad guy put a hostage on the phone, like unasked for, completely unexpectedly. And, that just caught me off guard. Didn't know what to do. We ultimately got everybody out. But there were several moments in there where I was just like completely caught off guard by what happened. And in hindsight, it was, I don't want to say exhilarating, it was enormously satisfying.
Let's switch gears a little bit. So you touched on Black Swan Group a little bit. You started this company 15 years ago focused on teaching business executives like myself. I've enjoyed your teachings, the insights and techniques of FBI hostage negotiators. What inspires you to go into coaching and to coach others?
It really is inspiring to help people, first of all, get better and do better for themselves. And the one thing that we get on a regular basis that I love is when somebody says to us, this deal is going to change my life. And as great as that is to hear, the other thing that's always really satisfying about that is what's not said. And they never say, I had them over a barrel. I took advantage of them. I did this to them. I did that to them. The harm of others is never included in the successes of our clients. And that's really cool. And we have a top level negotiation group. We refer to it as a cohort. It's kind of our mastermind top performers. One of those guys last year told me, I made more money being collaborative than I ever made being cutthroat. You guys taught me how to be collaborative, and I thought I was doing good being cutthroat, and I made way more money, which means he's not, succeeding at the expense of others. That is really, really cool.
Yeah, it becomes more fulfilling and you can walk away. And I think what a lot of people lose insight on negotiations is that you might see that person again, especially in my business, commercial real estate. You deal with a broker or a seller, or I deal with medical properties all day long around the United States. You might run into that hospital system again. And people remember certain aspects of a negotiations. That's a great point that you brought up. How did you name it the Black Swan Group? Like, how did that name come about?
Well, when I left the FBI back in 2007, and I don't know if you remember this movie, Rodney Dangerfield went back to school. The old guy goes back to school.
Yep.
Well, I kind of did the Rodney Dangerfield thing, the guy who's like 10 times older than everybody else in class. That was me, practical guy. And at about the same time, Nassim Nicholas Taleb wrote a book called The Black Swan, The Impact of the Highly Improbable. And I thought, yeah, great negotiation techniques those are small changes that nobody notices, but the impact is incredible. And then the unknown unknowns, the things that you discover in the negotiation that'll change everything. The impact of the highly improbable is awesome. And I love the metaphor and I was inspired by it. That's why we named the company the Black Swan Group.
So in some of your coaching materials, you refer to counterintuitive techniques.
Yeah.
Share some examples of counterintuitive techniques for our audience.
Well, like we're out of the yes business. Like we don't try to get people to say yes. We get them to say no. Instead of saying, do you agree? We say, do you disagree? Instead of saying, do you have a few minutes to talk? We say, it's now a bad time to talk. I mean, for decision making, at the point of decision or call to action, or to get somebody's attention, we use the word no. No is not failure. No is safety and protection for the other side. So recognizing there's an ocean of difference on a word from how does it feel to speak it or how does it feel to hear it. People hate hearing no, but people love saying it. So it makes it feel safe. So why not utilize that and encourage the other side to feel safe and protected by what you're trying to get them to say instead of making them feel trapped, tricked, flim-flammed, or bamboozled, which is what happens most of the time when you're trying to get somebody to say yes. So we are out of the yes business entirely.
Yeah, I've used that technique you taught, and it's done wonders for me in negotiations on purchase and sale agreements, leases, and so I love it. It's just an incredible. It's a brilliant technique. And I've seen it firsthand the success it creates. So, when you work with executives, Chris, what are the areas of negotiation they tend to be the weakest at, and how do you help them improve?
Well, they might not be good at actually listening. Like that's probably across the board one of the biggest problems. People are not always listening to understand because they're afraid that understanding is agreement, and it is not. Like I can understand where you're coming from and disagree with it strongly, not even like it, but I can understand it. And a lot of people are poor at understanding, listening to understand. They're listening while they're thinking, they're listening to contradict, they're listening to argue, they're listening to get an aha, here's where you're wrong, listening to correct. That's a real common problem. And then very few people really understand the power of influence that you gain in relationship building if somebody feels heard. Like most people say, well, what good is it going to do if I make them feel heard? Well, they're more likely to agree with you once they feel heard. And it's very counterintuitive for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I always say seek the truth in what someone's saying, and you'll build a deeper rooted connection with them.
I love that. Yeah, great. Well put. Well
It's
put.
it's just the truth. I mean, I think all of us, it's like one of the things I had to work on when I was younger and I started developing in business to get to where I am today was not understanding what people were saying to me. I would listen to the words, but I couldn't understand the truth behind it. Once I started understanding the truth, I had those aha moments like now I can build that bridge to connect with someone.
Well
So,
said.
so as you know, I run a commercial real estate investment firm, and hypothetically, if I were to become your client, how would you approach teaching negotiations to someone like me who has already a ton of experience? Based on your experience, where would be the areas of negotiation that someone like me may be less knowledgeable about?
Well, there's going to be several things that are really brilliant that you're already doing. A couple things that we'd ask for you to unlearn, and then probably a couple things that we'd ask for you to add to your skill set. Now, the diagnosis is going to be which is which. Like, I've never run into any really experienced person when we've shared the 9 skills or the 2 or 3 essential strategies. When at some point in time they haven't said, like, "Yeah, man, I've been doing that for a while," and that's almost always true. I just don't know up front which one of those it is. So, we're going to interact with you a little bit. We're gonna sort of feel where your mindset is and try to get a feel for whether we need a mindset shift or just start adding skills to your list. It's going to be one or the other. And so we'll a bit of a diagnosis of where you are right now, and then see how open you are to learning. Some people have succeed via they pick up skills real fast. Some people succeed just because they're relentless and they never give up. And some people do both. And so it's understanding if you pick it up fast, then you're gonna drop some stuff a lot easier. If you're a really hard worker, every skill that you have it was hard fought, hard won. And you might have trouble letting some of that stuff go. So I'm gonna want to know a little bit of which of those that you are.
Is that an issue where people are putting up like a glass wall because of their beliefs and it's hard to be coachable or to be vulnerable in front of you because they feel like they've had success and they feel like their way has worked for them? Is that a struggle with some of your clients just to be able to kind of lower the barriers and say, all right, Chris, I'm yours. I am going to be coachable. I am going to be your guy. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'm going to listen. I'm just going to apply the work and see the results happen.
It's a struggle. It's definitely a struggle for some. It's definitely a struggle for some, and a hard part for some people, and in particular, get people out of the yes business. That's really increasing your winning percentage. Like I will never argue with anybody whether or not they made deals by getting people to say, yeah, you did. And probably when you learn that skill, it increased how many you were making. And you went from a 0 win rate to a 15% win rate. But from shifting from yes to no could bring you to a 65% win rate. But comparatively, adopting yes made you so much more successful than you were previously, or whatever thing I'm trying to get you to learn. You say, look, I was nowhere before I learned this, and now I'm doing really well. And you want me to stop doing that? For some people, it's a really hard thing because they don't have a sense of the upside.
Well said. I love that. So you wrote a book based on real estate professionals called The Full Fee Agent.
Yeah.
And I believe the book focused on agents collecting full fees. Share more about what inspired you to write this book and what has the response been towards the book?
Well, the book into coaching, probably about 6-ish years ago, my co-author, Steve Shull, approached my son, Brandon, and said, look, I read Never Split the Difference, and this applies to everything, and we got to apply it to real estate agents. And Steve's core values resonated immediately with Brandon, and Brandon said, look, you got to talk to this guy. And I did. And we started jointly coaching. He got me involved in his coaching practice, applying the ideas and Never Split the Difference directly to what residential real estate agents were going through, which is just giving away their value right and left, just killing themselves, just making their life so hard. And the people that we've been coaching are making as much or more money in half the time and are happier. And so after coaching people successfully for several years, ultimately we're like, look, we got to put a book out. So the reception of the book has been very good. It's good for residential real estate agents. And it's also a good supplement to add to whatever your learning is. I mean, you got to read several different books and come at the same topic from several angles to really adopt it. I like to think of it as the Elon Musk approach to learning. I remember hearing a long time ago, his brother said Elon would read 2 completely different books simultaneously, looking for universal principles. And so even if you're not a residential real estate agent, it's about holding your value. It's about not giving away your value. It's about getting paid what you're worth. And people who are courageous enough to think that there's a better way love it.
Let's talk about your book, Never Split the Difference, negotiating as if your life depended on it. What was it like promoting the book for you? And were you surprised by the tremendous positive response you had to the book? I mean, I know just from my colleagues, so many people have read that book. I mean, how did you feel about all this?
Well, it is done far better than I could ever have hoped for. I mean, just far better. I remember when we were first working on, me and Tall and my son Brandon very much involved in the production of the book. We talked about Stuart Diamond's book, and I remember Tall saying to somebody else that were our agent, like, I heard Stuart Diamond's book sold 1 million copies. And Stuart Diamond's book is getting more, and I'm a fan of that book, and so is Tall, and so is Brandon. And I remember him saying like 1 million copies, that was like, and that's equivalent of dying and going to heaven. I thought, wow, man, I wonder if we'll ever get there. And in far less time, we're at 3.5 million copies worldwide. So there's no way that I could have imagined that. Promoting it has been a ball. I mean, the real promotion of the book really started when I started doing podcasts and talking about it. And since I love talking about it and, evangelizing it, then it's been a pleasure every step of the way, since it does make people happier. And the secondary benefit is that they're far more financially successful. That ain't a bad secondary benefit.
No, it's amazing, and I think all of us have benefited from your teachings and your writings, and I hope you keep doing it. I really do. I hope you keep focusing and keep pushing forward with your content and your knowledge, because it really adds a tremendous amount of value to everyone in business and in life, whether it's business negotiations, personal negotiations, relationships. You can intertwine whatever is going on in life with all your teachings. And so I really appreciate, I know the folks out there that have enjoyed your content, appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge. So
It's kind of you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's
absolutely,
very kind.
absolutely, you deserve it. We're all works in progress. And the name of a show behind us is called I Own It. It's owning every aspect of your life, all your behavior. That's why I wanted you on the show, because you own it, Chris. Can you share a recent example where you realized you had it wrong and you didn't own it fully?
Wow. Well, I tend to hold myself accountable. If somebody makes me mad, I'll do a bad job in a negotiation. If I'm deceived, I don't like deception. And it was a while back, and I'm sure I've done this recently. But I was being deceived, and I got angry, and it just doesn't help to get angry, even if you're being deceived. And I got angry, and I got a little more direct and pointed than was in any way, shape, or form helpful. And I will do that occasionally, and I know I shouldn't. And occasionally, my anger gets the best of me, and it. A friend of mine said a long time ago, it doesn't do you any good to tell somebody what you really think of them. And I know that in hindsight, he was talking about when you think negatively of them, it doesn't do you any good to tell them that you think negatively. And I've fallen victim to that a couple of times.
Yeah, that's great advice. And what do you do anything on yourself or teaching yourself something? Some people meditate before they get into negotiation. Do you do anything that you could share that helps you prevent from getting triggered?
Well, yeah. I mean, I do a gratitude exercise every day in the morning, and I'm moderately successful at doing a reboot in the middle of the afternoon. But the daily mental hygiene, at least first thing in the morning, I do that every day, and that's designed to carry me through the whole day. And I should do it through about at least twice a day, but I get my first thing in the morning one in every day.
What is the best way for our audience to engage with you and learn more about you and your teachings? How would you recommend they follow you?
The website is blackswanltd.com, BLACKSWANLTD.com. In the upper right hand corner of the website, there's a button that you can click on to sign up for the newsletter. The newsletter is free, complimentary. More importantly, it's actionable, concise. You'll get it emailed to you on Tuesday mornings. Short, sweet, quick, easy read, not complicated. No decisions on which article to read. We value your time. And there are also training announcements, product announcements. When we're going to be, we got training coming up in Chicago, where we're going to be after Chicago. That's the best way, is to subscribe to the newsletter and let us help keep you getting better, help keep you getting better each and every day.
It sounds like you picked Chicago in the right time of the year when it's a little bit warming up. I'm born and raised originally from Chicago. I just moved to California. So when is that event in Chicago?
I think it's either May or June.
Okay.
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I know I'm going to be there, but either May or June. And yeah, you don't want to be in Chicago in January, do you?
No, definitely not. Those are great months to be in, and it's a great city. So what is on tap for Chris Voss? Like, what's forthcoming? What can people get excited about? Is there new books you're working on? Is it new content? You got new programs with Black Swan? What are you excited about? Like, what's coming down the pike?
Well, we're going to re-engineer our in-person training sessions next year, and we're going to make our the executive level course, the foundational level, a little more extensive, so that you can really get a solid grasp and a solid foundation in 2 really great days of training. Put you in a position to handle anything. And we're going to put that together for next year after this year is out. And in the meantime, our 2-day course is our advanced course. And if you're up for challenge, that's currently a good course. So we're gonna after we finish this training year, we're gonna put that out. There's also some discussion of a non-scripted television show, and with any luck, we may be filming it by the fall. Then who knows? Maybe it'll come out next year.
Oh, that's exciting. So obviously you're very passionate about teaching, impacting others, and serving others, which is very admirable. When you look at Chris Voss, what are your hobbies like? What do you enjoy doing besides the work? You've been doing your work for so long and impacting so many people. Give us a glimpse of what do you do on the daily basis? Like, what are the hobbies and what are you passionate about or in love with behind the scenes that people don't get to see?
Well, I take good care of myself just because it's good physical maintenance is good spiritual maintenance. I mean, you want to enjoy life. Steve Scholl and I were doing an interview the other day. He was talking about happiness being a choice. And, I'm working on my daily happiness. I want to be happy on a regular basis. Then everything else kind of flows into place. Like if I get the chance, if I do any travel, I love spontaneous travel. The more spontaneous, the better. And then if we got a planned trip, I go someplace with my girlfriend, Wendy. A year ago, we were in Milan, and because she was walking in a fashion show. She's a model and an actress and a singer and a songwriter. And so we just, one day we just out bouncing around Milan a little bit, and we saw the cathedral there. It was awesome. I loved it. It was inspirational. It was an unplanned visit. So I love spontaneous things whenever I get the chance to make it spontaneous.
So we're going to wrap up with our 3 questions. I've been waiting for you to come on so we can talk about them. All right. So in our studio in Laguna Beach, we have a couch. And how old are you now, by the way?
65.
Wow. You're a young 65. You look great.
Thank you.
So you're laying on the couch. I said, Chris, get on the couch, lay down, close your eyes. You're now this 65-year-old gentleman, a lot of experience, has helped thousands and thousands of people around the world with your teachings and with your skill set. And I tell you to close your eyes and you can go back to when you were 16 years old. And you can talk to yourself when you're 16 right now. What advice would you give yourself knowing what you know now with all your experience and knowledge?
Just be a little gentler. Take a couple of miles per hour off your fastball. Keep working hard, keep learning, but just don't change any approach or any attitude you have or motivation you have or goal that you have. Just be a little gentler in your approach.
Okay. I like that. So it's our last day on earth, God forbid. It's you and me. It's our last meal together. It's your choice, Chris. What are we eating and what are we drinking?
Steak.
Okay.
We're eating steak and probably a good scotch.
Okay. I'm rolling with you, and I like that. Perfect. How do we cook our steaks?
Well, I'm medium plus. Not quite medium well, but a little bit more than medium. That's
Okay.
not like mine.
All right. So in our studios in Laguna Beach, we have a grand piano, drums, and 6 electric guitars. If you're in studio with me, and obviously you are more than welcome, you have an open door policy anytime you're in Laguna Beach, California, to come over. If you can pick any musician or band to play us a song, they can be living or deceased, Chris. Who would you invite in the studio with you and me, and what song would they play us?
Wow. U2 and tough. A lot of choices on U2. Probably Elevation.
Okay. Wow. That's the first one we've had U2. I was waiting for someone to bring that up. So you're the first one. That's fantastic.
All right. Excellent.
Well, Chris Voss, I want to thank you for joining us today. What a treat. Thank you for all the knowledge you shared and all the insight on yourself. And it was really nice to see you. If you are interested in listening to more episodes like this on the Ben Reinberg I Own It podcast, drop kick that right hand button and click subscribe. feel free to click the like button as many times as you can so we can share Chris Voss's knowledge and content all over the world and let it go viral like every one of our shows. If you're interested in following me, go to benreinberg.com. You could follow me on all the different social media platforms. You can learn about commercial real estate, as I will be teaching commercial real estate around the world shortly. Feel free to go to my company website, alliancecgc.com, and you can go on and learn about our brand new fund. It's one of the top funds in the United States called the Alliance Medical Property Fund. I want to thank everyone for joining us. And Chris Voss, thank you so much for being here today. It was a real pleasure, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you for listening to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg. To hear our past episodes and connect with Ben, visit benreinberg.com.